But today, there's something completely different. You have maybe a little bit of, maybe something of a little history lesson going back to the wild, crazy days of the ancient times in the 1970s. And well, I can't see the screen. I wanted to talk about some of the opposition that Prabhupada met in his preaching, the organized opposition in the form of the anti-cult movement and the deprogrammers and the 1976 brainwashing trial where the president of the New York Temple and the Women's Sankirtan meeting were actually charged and were facing 10 to 20 years in prison for brainwashing the devotees of the temple. So it's interesting history. This is Prabhupada's quote when these attacks started coming. They're feeling the weight of this Hare Krishna movement. And exceptionally vigorous. I'll explain that at the end. So I am at, where my cursor? Okay, this is going to take some getting used to. Sorry.
I think duplicate would be better. You want the screen, like the same screen on your screen? Is that easier?
No, because I have notes. I have presented notes. I have notes.
Does the arrow button move? Arrow button, the keyboard?
Okay. No, I think I got it now.
Okay.
I don't need to go anywhere else. So I imagine this as it's like sometimes Krishna's pastimes are Krishna's described as a dramatic actor on the stage performing his so I imagine Prabhupada's pastimes like that. So his pastime of taking the Lord Chaitanya's Krishna consciousness, Sankirtan Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. So before the curtain rises, Krishna sets the scene for Prabhupada, and that is the counterculture. The counterculture was kind of the youth rebellion against established religion, against mainstream materialistic society, against their parents. And it was all jumbled up with all kinds of insanity and lots of drugs. But within that craziness, there was actually a tiny spark of genuine spiritual yearning. And Prabhupada was able to come and fan that spark and in just a few years create a wonderful worldwide movement. So, Prabhupada walks onto the stage. This is a early article from the New York Times. Maybe you've seen Swami's flock chants in the park to find ecstasy. So Prabhupada did what no one else could do. He could take that tiny spark, and within a few years he'd established over 100 temples, farms, schools, and had thousands of initiated disciples chanting Hare Krishna and helping him spread on his mission. So, for a good drama, you need a villain. So there was a lot of concern. I mean, people were just joining the Hare Krishna movement. There was all kinds of religious and pseudo-religious groups that span the range from mostly harmless to very creepy and even dangerous. Many young people were dropping out of mainstream society to join religious groups, hippie communes, you name it. And it raised the concern of not only parents, but establishing institutions, governments, religious organizations. So an actual organizations formed to combat these new religions. I'm using the term new religious movements. That's what the scholars use. At the time, they fashioned themselves as the anti-cult movement. And they made propaganda that must have been brainwashed to drop out of mainstream society and join these groups. And parents even hired the programmers to kidnap their adult children and force them to renounce the faith. Oh, before we go to this, when I say cult, now if you were to ask, just not someone here, but if you just ask a friend or a coworker, I think this person belongs to a cult, what would they think of? What are they implying by saying that this person is a cult? What's the implication there? Anyone? Something bad, yes. Something bad. Maybe something like this. You recognize this is Charles Manson. He had a group of followers he convinced to go out and kill people for him. He committed some mass murders back in the late 60s. So before the 1970s, cult was kind of a neutral term. It just referred to a group of, it didn't necessarily mean anything bad. Now it comes to mean something deviant or fringe or illegitimate. It used to mean just a small group of people, usually a small group, devoted to a particular person, idea, or philosophy. And it was often applied to religious movements outside the dominant religious or cultural inclination of society, but not necessarily bad. Like the Catholic Church, for example, had a cult of Mary and cult of various saints. They weren't opposed to the Catholic Church. I think actually they strengthened and supported in some way. But this word cult was latched onto, so now it implies that a negative connotation that people associate with things like kidnapping, brainwashing, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, other criminal activity, and even mass suicide. So Prabhupada often used the term in the old sense, the neutral sense. Here's some of Prabhupada's use of the word cult. Bhishmadev was one of the great authorities in preaching the cult of devotional service. And, speaking of his own my father and my forefathers, they all belong to this cult, Krishna cult. So naturally, from our childhood, we were trained in this cult. And and we also said, this is Lord Chaitanya's cult. What is this cult? His cult, he says, Amara Agya Guru Hanatari Desh Yaradete Tarakaha Krishna Upadesh. And the translation is, instruct everyone to follow the orders of Lord Krishna. In this way, become a spiritual master and try to liberate everyone in the land. So, Prabhupada also said, if Christ was not crucified, then his cult would have spread so much all over the world. Would not have spread all over the world. So, here Prabhupada is referring to Christianity as a cult. And actually, the modern definition, the first 100 years, it would have been considered a cult until the Emperor of Rome converted to Christianity, and overnight the pagan Roman Empire became the Holy Roman Empire. But now it's the mainstream, and we're the cult. So Prabhupada also had some things to say on brainwashing. He said that your brain is filled with all rubbish things, meat eating, and illicit sex, gambling, and we're washing them. Chaita Darpana Marjana. What's the translation? Chaita Darpana Marjana. Translation? Anyone? Yes. That's from the Shikshastika that the Sankirtan cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years together. Try to get this. So Prabhupada says, according to Vedic civilization, you're actually untouchable. In Indian civilization, dog is untouchable. And that is your best friend. Unless your brain is washed, you cannot understand it is necessary. So, Prabhupada had a couple of responses to this. His devotees Prabhupada's disciples bring to him all these things that they're saying, that we're brainwashed, that we're called, etc. And he had a couple of responses. One was, we're not brainwashing, we're brain giving. You have no brain. We're giving you a brain. Dearest Tatranamuyati, so dearest Tatranamuyati, that's that a sober person is not disturbed by is not bewildered by the change of body. So Dira, in the translation of Bhagavad Gita, it's translated as sober. Here, Prabhupada uses it to mean brain or intelligent. They have no brain, that they can't understand this change of body. That, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul continually passes, and then to another body of death. So people don't have the brain to understand that. So Prabhupada says we're brain giving. The other thing he said, it'll come up later, is that well, you have stool for brain, so it needs to be cleansed. So there were actually many instances of devotees being, and not just devotees, other alternative religions, people being physically abducted, isolated, restrained, and then barraged with continued arguments and attacks for as long as it takes for them to leave the group. And the programmers are usually hired by the family, by the parents of the person being deprogrammed. It's based on this idea of brainwashing. Okay, you've been brainwashed, you can't think for yourself, you can only do what the cult leader tells you to do, and so we have to physically remove you to get you to think for yourself. And we're going to imprison you and berate you for as long as it takes for you to think for yourself and leave the group. So, a couple of slides here to show different parenting styles. So I'm reading from Prabhupada's preface to actually the dedication to the Krishna book, which he dedicates to his father. He says, to my father, Gaur Mohanday, a pure devotee of Krishna, who raised me as a Krishna-conscious child from the beginning of my life. In my childhood play, he instructed me how to play Mridanga. He gave me Radha Krishna Vigraha to worship. And he gave me Jagannath Rath Yatra to duly observe the festival as my childhood play. So, Prabhupada described his father as a pure devotee who also trained him in devotional service from the earliest stage. Prabhupada saw Radha Krishna Jesus and he wanted that. Father got it for him. He would have a little Rath Yatra. His father bought him a 3-foot tall Rath Yatra card. He had a little Rath Yatra for the neighborhood children. And Prabhupada's father, his friends would come and, you're having Rath Yatra and you're not inviting me? So it was great fun. This is a great childhood play. Now I want to contrast this with another father who had a slightly different reaction to his child taking to Krishna consciousness. This, of course, is Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad Maharaj. So Hiranyakashipu was asking Prahlad what's the best thing he learned, and Prahlad replied, once you go to Vrindavan, where only Krishna consciousness is prevalent, and once you take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Very next verse. This is the intelligence of children spoiled by the words of the enemy. And a few verses later, kill him as soon as possible. So, we don't have Hiranyakashipus in this age, but maybe that inclination is there just a little bit for someone who would want to have their child forcibly abducted and reprogrammed. So there was this character, Ted Patrick, and he invented the practice of deprogramming. claimed to have conducted over 200 deprogrammings. He was in and out of jail for all the time. He kept going back. He kept, and many times actually, he would be thrown out of court. He founded what was to become the largest anti-cult organization, Cult Awareness Network. Here is shown, there's a picture of a TV appearance he did with Rita Ananda Maharaj. So the Cult Awareness Network, I tell you, when you start doing research on this, you can run into some very dark places. The Cult Awareness Network was an anti-cult group in the 70s and 80s, and it did many things. It referred parents, deprogrammers, if somebody had concern about the kid in some group. And when I say kid, these are, for the most part, adult children, in their late teens or 20s. So they acted as referral service. They had people working with them. Atheistic psychiatrists. There was one psychiatrist, Louis Jolyon West, and I saw his name associated with the Cult Awareness Network, and I looked him up. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe this guy. Louis Jolyon, his nickname was Jolly West, which is very ironic considering his career. He was a famous psychiatrist known for his mind control experiments. In brainwashing, and he also researched LSD. He worked with MK Ultra. Do you know what MK Ultra is? MK Ultra was the CIA mind control experiments, very secret stuff going on in the 50s and 60s. Anyway, Jolly West was involved with that. And they would, the CIA would, I think they worked with a lot of soldiers. They'd give them like massive doses of LSD and see if they could, see how they could manipulate their mind. And often it was done without their consent or even knowledge. They were trying, the military's interest to see if we could do things like extract forced confessions out of people, or even program people's behavior to act as assassins, things like that. So anyway, this is Jolly West with the Cult Awareness Network. And then, a documentary just came out a few days ago. I haven't seen it. It's on Netflix. I don't have a Netflix subscription. But it links Jolly West to the Ted Manson murders. That Jolly West was recruiting people for his LSD experiments from the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, and Ted Manson, Charles Manson would frequent that place with his girls to be treated for gonorrhea or whatnot. So anyway, very creepy stuff. I don't want to get too far afield, but so the anti-cult network also would sometimes even align with mainstream religions who were threatened that their children were joining these cults. There was a very funny exchange of letters between Jayadvaita Maharaj, who's of Jewish background, with the B'nai B'rith. This was published in Back to Godhead many years ago. That B'nai B'rith, the Jewish organization, was putting out pamphlets warning Jewish kids about these new religious movements. So Jayadvaita challenged them, and their responses were put in the Back to Godhead. So, and other things the Cult Awareness Network would do is they go to schools and give presentations. And I don't know who, I'd like to find out more about this group. I mean, they had some big money behind them because they were involved in a lot of stuff. They were advising, law enforcement about these cults. They were actually parents who didn't come. They would find out parents who were members of groups, and they'd approach them. Do you know what your kid's involved in? He's involved in this and that. Maybe you should have him programmed. They were lobbying governments to change the laws. One thing that as deprogramming itself became questionable, and whether there were some challenges where they can keep doing these illegal programs. The government was being petitioned to use the conservatorship laws. Now, conservatorship laws, they exist in most states, so that like if an elderly parent is becoming a little senile and can't manage their own affairs, their children could go to the court and petition that the court make them their legal guardian and can manage their affairs. So in some cases, they tried to use these conservatorship laws to on the children who were in the Hare Krishna movement or other movements. So then they could be taken and put in psychiatric care or whatever and deprogrammed that way. So this went on, to varying degrees up through the 90s, and they were finally, the Cult Awareness Network was finally sued into bankruptcy in the 1990s. And it's kind of funny, they were sued by the Scientologists, who were very good at lawfare. So the Cult Awareness Network was facing like 30 lawsuits from Scientologist lawyers. And in the bankruptcy settlement, Scientologists got the rights to the name Cult Awareness Network. So if you looked up Cult Awareness Network, you get a site that was actually put out by the Scientologists saying how Scientology is not actually called, it's just misunderstood. Okay, so in 1976, there was a trial. IDK Shivaswamy and Treya Das, the temple president and women's Sankirtan leader at the New York temple. So there was one woman, devotee at the temple, Murti Vandya. She had survived an attempt at deprogramming and had come back to the temple. And the temple authorities we're going to try to get these deprogrammers prosecuted. So they went to the police, they went to the prosecutor, and instead of taking the deprogrammers to trial, IDK Shivaswamy and Treya Das, they were arrested. They were charged. So the basis of the prosecution, they alleged that brainwashing was used to hold these devotees. There was Murti Bandya, and there was another devotee who had also survived deprogramming, Vasugopal. So the Attorney General who was pushing this case, he was, he had some political ambition. He thought this case would make a big splash and make a name for himself, take down those weirdo Hare Krishnas. Here's a quote from him. "The thing that frightens me is that a group like this, or any other group, can use mind control to create an army of zombies or robots who can undermine the government or law enforcement." So, Prabhupada was giving advice how to handle this case. There's some interesting conversations. IDK Shivaswamy went to Mayapur and met with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, we must argue from our books. Therefore I say, without any lawyer, keep one lawyer if necessary, but our argument should be from the books. He wanted the books to be presented as evidence in court that this shows that we're a bona fide religion. And the devotees are getting different advice. How should we handle this case? Dristadumna Swami's father was a big businessman, president of Seagram's liquor company, and he was trying to help, but he was giving advice. Well, grow your hair out a little, wear a suit, don't come off as weird. And so Prabhupada's approach is different. He advised IDK Shivaswamy, carry your danda into court. You can, if they ask, you can explain that this means subjugation. We have voluntarily subjugated ourselves under God. This is a symbolic reminder that I have fully surrendered to Krishna with my body, mind, and words, and I must serve him. He also, this is where Prabhupada was advising that you are brainless and requires to be washed. Therefore we say it is full of stool. We have come to wash it. That is our thankless duty. He also had some very heavy criticisms of materialistic culture and the sex-addicted culture in terms that even a crude character such as me won't repeat in a mixed company like this, but you can look it up or ask me later. So, preparing for the trial. These are some headlines from the New York Times. So, it was assigned to Judge Leahy. He was actually a big judge. He was a member of the New York Supreme Court. He had a reputation as being very tough, a hanging judge. Actually, I interviewed Tradas a couple of weeks ago, and he used that term. You know what hanging judge is? I think it goes back to the Old West. It was a judge who, would impose severe sentences. This is when hanging was the means of capital punishment. So if you went to a hanging judge, there's a chance you might get hanged. So this judge had a tough reputation. So there was a lot of publicity about this case. There were favorable scholars that had been studying the movement, Stilson Judah and Harvey Cox and many of these people, and they came and spoke up about our bona fides. The Indian community rallied to our defense, and the Indian government even offered Adhikesha and Tradas asylum, political asylum, if they were going to face jail time, that they could seek asylum in India. Tradas said that they considered that. They thought, it would save our neck, but it would be bad for the movement. It would almost be like admitting guilt, and then it would be open season on the devotees at all the temples. So Prabhupada encouraged them to stand and fight. So Tradas said that one of the turning points in the publicity to this case came when an editorial was published in the New York Times by Harvey Cox, and Harvey Cox was a very respected scholar of religion. He was chairman of applied religion at Harvard University. He published best-selling books. I think his best-selling book was The Secular City, where he talked about how our society is becoming secularized and have adopted secular rituals to substitute what have traditionally been religious practice. So Harvey Cox wrote an op-ed in the New York Times defending the Hare Krishna movement. And then it was just 1 week later, Tradas and Adhikesha arrived in court. It happened to be St. Patrick's Day, 1977, and Tradas and Adhikesha, two Irish lads, Angus Murphy and Harold Connolly, they show up in Queens in their dhotis, tilak, and green flower garments. So the case actually never went to trial. The judge, he might have been a tough judge, but he was no dummy. He could see that he was not going to only have a major First Amendment fight on his hands, but maybe an international political diplomatic row. So he threw it out of court on the spot. And the judgment that the judge gave down, this was a landmark. He said, the Hare Krishna movement is a bona fide religion with roots in India that go back thousands of years. So Prabhupada was ecstatic when he heard this. He says, when Prabhupada heard this judgment, he said, my mission is now successful. In 1965, I went there. Now it is recognized after 12 years. I was loitering the street, carrying the books. Nobody cared. The devotees would try to get him to talk about other things. Bhakti Sut Damodar had something about the Bhaktivedanta Institute, but Prabhupada just kept going back that the case in New York, our most suspicious sign is this: Hare Krishna movement is bona fide. So this statement by Prabhupada, my mission is now successful. This is particularly poignant, as this was just several years before he exited the stage. Excuse me. So, if I can hold it together here, I'm going to tell my story. So this is my intersection with the anti-cult movement. I don't have any slides for this, I'll just tell it. In the summer of in the summer 1978. Okay, so here I am, a 24-year-old brahmachari. I've been in the Hare Krishna movement 4 years, living in the New York Temple on 55th Street. And at that time, I'm struggling a bit, getting a little burned out, you know, regimented lifestyle, and, you know, being out on the pick, and, you know, I felt like I needed a break. So, this whole celibacy thing. So I didn't tell anybody at the temple. I just left. I hitchhiked back to my parents in Chicago. And there was a lot of hitchhiking going on in those days. It was no big thing. So, my parents, about my parents, you know, I loved my parents, but they were, you know, they were totally inimical in my involvement with Christian consciousness, to say the least. And in those days, we didn't always know how to interact properly with people who could maybe come off as, you know, a wee bit fanatical. So I call my parents, call my mother from time to time, and she was always very heavy, you know, compared Krishna consciousness to being mentally retarded, and you're wasting your life, and you could be doing so much. When are you coming home? And, you know, I'd hear this, I'd just be in anxiety for days. So after about a week, my parents, I'm ready to go back to the temple. Okay, I've had my break, I'm ready to go back. So I tell them, okay, I'm going to hitchhike back to New York. And they wanted me to stay. Well, just stay for a couple more days. You know, your sister's coming back from college, you can see her. And look, we'll even buy you a plane ticket back to New York if you stay 2 more days. And that was surprising, you know. Okay, they buy me a plane ticket to go back to the temple. Okay, well, little did I know what they were scheming. So the day I was supposed to fly back to New York, very early in the morning, my uncle comes up to my bedroom, wakes me up. Hey, somebody I want you to see. This is very unusual. Nothing like this ever happened before. So my uncle, he was young for an uncle. He was only about 10 years older than me, and he was, you know, something of a tough guy. So he wouldn't tell me who wanted to meet me, and I, you know, okay, I feel like I'm walking into a trap here, so. So I go into the bathroom and get dressed, and I'm thinking maybe I should jump out the window, but it's a second floor building, you'll probably break my leg. So we walk downstairs, and he goes, oh yeah, he's in the basement. Now I really know it's a trap. You know, this guy's coming to meet me, and he's going to meet me down in the basement. Huh? Okay, so I walk down to the basement, walk in, and who's there? Ted Patrick himself. So I recognize him immediately. So I think, yeah, I don't think I want to talk to this guy. But as I leave, there's my uncle blocking the door, and behind him is my father. By him, there are these 2 other guys I never saw before. One of them is like huge guy. Okay, so I'm outnumbered 5-1. So they sit me down on the chair, and Patrick goes into a spiel about how I was brainwashed by the cult. I need to be able to think for myself, and his job, Patrick's job, was to get me to think for myself and break through the program responses that have been drilled into me. So preliminaries aside, he goes upstairs to talk to my father, my uncle, my mother, leaves me down in the basement with the 2 assistant programmers. There was the big black guy and the skinny white guy. And I figured they're going up to talk logistics or whatever, or finance. It was probably felt like it was all arranged at the last minute, so they had to work out some details. So I'm sitting down there. I think maybe I should make a run for it. So I start to run out, and the big guy, the big black guy, he chases me down and tackles me. I found out later he was a college football player on the summer break. And I believe that it was an impressive tackle. So they drag me back in, and all the commotion. Everybody comes downstairs, and this time they put me in handcuffs. And it wasn't the first time I'd seen handcuffs. So, they all come back downstairs. Patrick has the big guy put me in a tight bear hug, so both my arms are locked. My uncle came with his scissors, cut off my sika, my neck beads, and my Brahmin thread. And then shortly after that, it was time to make a move. I think they were afraid they didn't want to do the deprogramming there because if the devotees got wind of it, they might come to rescue me. Actually, Ted Patrick, that happened to Basa Gopal when he was deprogrammed by Ted Patrick. The devotees somehow learned that they were keeping him at his parents' house. So a bunch of devotees from the Boston Temple, when they started banging on the windows and causing a big commotion. So they were going to move me to my uncle's house. So still in handcuffs, I was put in the back seat of the car. The big guy on one side, my uncle on the other side, Ted Patrick driving, we drove to my uncle's house. So my uncle's, I got to tell you about my uncle's house. This is a strange house. You've seen like taxidermy stuffed animals. They stuff an animal skin and pose in lifelike pose. This is how he had his house decorated. There's a polar bear. There are 2 lions. There's a giraffe with its head and neck going from the fireplace up to the tall ceiling. He had a display case with a couple of dozen handguns. Well, that was in the upstairs. The deprogramming was actually down in this dingy basement on the bare cement floor. They take me to, we got to the house, my parents and my aunt and uncle there, and Ted Patrick, they all sat around the table and they were, talked about deprogramming, and my aunt was trying to impress Ted Patrick with all the books she'd read on this subject. And that's the last I saw my aunt and uncle, actually. They left the house in the care of Ted Patrick and the deprogrammers, which was kind of ironic because Patrick himself is a black guy and my uncle was something of a racist, known to throw around the N-word pretty liberally. I guess desperate times call for desperate measures. So we're down in the basement, and the program starts in earnest. Patrick, he'd sit you down in a chair, get right across from you in another chair, up close, face to face, and he'd go into a spiel. You're just a mindless robot, a zombie. To take away your ability to think, your free will, your manhood, all you can do is what your code leader tells you to do. You chant the same thing over and over and over and over again. It makes all the energy go to one part of your brain, and the rest of your brain goes rotten. Anyway, he could go on like that for days, believe me. And he did. There are 5,000, according to him, there's 5,000 cults in the United States, and they all use the same mind control technique. They have a thing called on-the-spot hypnosis, which is, okay, get this, on-the-spot hypnosis is a mental energy emanating from the eyes and the fingertips. And this is how you brainwash someone. You might meet someone out in book distribution and you put them on-the-spot hypnosis, you give them a post-hypnotic suggestion, come to the Sunday feast. Let me pepper you with questions, Christians say he's the only way. Jesus said he's the only way. Who's lying? Who's lying? You can't answer a simple question. It's psychologically impossible if you would answer a simple question. And it's going on like for days. Why didn't you send your mother a Mother's Day card? Try to guilt trip you that you've not been that close to your parents since you joined the movement. So a lot of blasphemy too. I won't repeat the blasphemy, but there's some things he said that were so ridiculous and off target, I think I can safely repeat it. Now get this. Prabhupada was just the front man. The movement was actually owned and controlled by 5 mafioso types in Los Angeles. And they're the ones who were making all the money off of this cult. So if you think about it, this is actually indirect praise of Prabhupada. The Prabhupada's character was so spotless that you could, it'd be ridiculous to try to make the case that Prabhupada was, we're just in this for the money or something. So he had to invent these mafia types in Los Angeles who were actually the real movers behind this movement. So this could go on. This would go on for hours. He had a video camera and he'd record the session. I think he wanted to make a documentary about it or something. And he showed me footage of one Christian who was looking rather ridiculous, talking in tongues, trying to talk in tongues to deprogram. Once in a while, I'd bring my father down if I said, just to see how it was going. So at night, I would be handcuffed to the bed because they didn't want me to try to run away again. So after a couple of days, Patrick left. He left for the day. He took off. I didn't know where he went. He left me in charge of his two assistants, the big guy and the big black guy and the skinny guy. And neither of these, I don't know where he got these guys because they really didn't know anything. They didn't know anything. They were never in a cult. They didn't know anything about cults. All they knew was what Ted Patrick told them. And the skinny guy was kind of a jerk, and his only point of reference is his sister once went to a stage hypnotist. He seemed to think this was very relevant. So, they would try to give me the once over in invitation of Ted Patrick, and at one point I said, okay, look, I've had enough. I'm not talking to you guys anymore. And I just went silent. So they were they didn't like that. Apparently they were under orders that they had to keep the program going on Patrick's one. So they handcuffed me behind my back around a pillar in the basement and left me there almost all night, just to sleep on the bare cement floor. So Ted Patrick returned the next morning, and his assistant asked him, how'd it go? He said, oh, short and snappy. So I took it to mean that he had been called out to another deprogramming, and that person snapped right away. It was quick and short and snappy. And then he started up his spiel again, deprogramming. And then later in the day, two other people showed up. And I'm thinking, what is deprogramming becoming a spectator sport or what? So the other two people were Patrick's secretary, Asundra Sachs. And there was another young woman who had been previously deprogrammed by Ted Patrick. And I'm thinking she was short and snappy. She was the one from the previous day that, I forget her name. I think her name might have been Janet. I'll call her Janet. But she wasn't even a member of any religious group. Her and her boyfriend, they were into some kind of spiritual thing and talk about the Bible and whatnot. And her mother didn't like it. So, I mean, literally, Ted Patrick deprogrammed her from her boyfriend. I mean, I'm serious. He said, oh, he was going to start his own cult. So, I mean, this girl, as you can imagine, she was confused as hell. She didn't know what was going on. So, Patrick would have us sit together, and she kind of sympathized with what I was going through, she admitted that she kind of respected I was kind of defiant, standing up to Patrick, and so I've been told I can be a little stubborn. I don't think it's true, but my parents told me that, my sister told me that, my wife told me that, but I stubbornly refuse to accept it. But this is one case where a little stubbornness might have served me well. Because, I mean, look, hey, there's no way I'm going to let this jerk Ted Patrick baby drive me down from Krishna conscience. I could be obstinate and stubborn like that. I could withstand that. But, as a struggling young brahmachari, one thing I knew I could not withstand for very long was a pretty girl being nice to me. So I took this as Krishna's sign. Okay, it's time to wrap this up and get out of here. My plan from the beginning was put up as much resistance as is necessary to make it look good, and then go along with it, and then look for a way to get out. So I started, instead of arguing back, nodding, maybe it is kind of mind control, and talking about my involvement. Well, look, when I was in the cult, it wasn't all bad. I had friends there. We had we had fun sometimes, and I don't know if I'm a good actor or but I'm surprised that he bought it. He figured I was out of it. He brought my parents down, a tearful reunion with my mother, and everyone was so happy that I'd snapped. And I was telling you earlier that how it pulled this attachment to my parents was so pulled on my heart so strongly when they and that was kind of the point where maybe of snapping of that attachment. That this woman is crying that she thinks she's getting her son back, but she doesn't know her son's going to run away again the first chance he gets. So anyway, we were able to. Some years later, we were able to reconcile to some degree, even though she still considered that place in my life. So part of the deprogramming process is after you renounce your involvement with cult, you need a program. You need a period of reconditioning. Reconditioning is where you're kind of trained up again in sense gratification. You go out and do fun stuff. You go to restaurants, movies. You do whatever you want, but you can do. But you're always with your assistant deprogrammers. They're always there as your chaperones or bodyguards. So because you might float. Because after you've been in the cult, even after you're deprogrammed, you might float and go back into your cult thinking. So that they had to put you through a period of reconditioning, and so they're asking me, what would you like to do? And at this time, the original Star Wars movie was still out in the theaters, and I'd been out on Sankirtan and I'd seen big crowds around the movie theater, and it was actually a cultural phenomenon at the time. No, let's go see Star Wars. Oh, they thought that was great. That I had an idea. I wanted to go out and do some interior activity. So that night went out. Myself, two assistant programmers, and Janet, the girl who was just programmed. And I kind of had the feeling that this was taken on the vibe of a chaperone date. Because they always made sure Janet and I sat together. So anyway, we went to see the movie, and actually I enjoyed the movie a lot. So you had this the new Bhakta, Luke, and he was learning the ways of Krishna consciousness from his guru Obi-Wan. They talked about the Force. Okay, it's a little impersonal, but you have to give him a little slack for a Hollywood movie. But then there's the programmer, Darth Vader, who's trying to lure Luke away from the Force to the dark side. So I was having fun watching. There was even a little on-the-spot hypnosis. These are not the droids you were looking for. So we went to a restaurant afterwards and had beer and pizza. I didn't have beer, but my assistant deprogrammers, they were drinking pretty heavily. It was all on my dad's tab, I'm sure. The big guy especially, he had like 6 drinks. He was drinking double whiskeys. So, and all the time I'm thinking, well, in the movie theater or in the restaurant, should I stand up and shout, "I've been kidnapped! Call the police!" But maybe I was a little paranoid, but I knew that sometimes the authorities would side with the deprogrammers. I mean, they tended to sympathize in many cases with parents. Oh, these poor, the poor crying mother, and he's lost her son, and here's this heroic Ted Patrick trying to rescue him. So I didn't make a run for it then, but that night went back to my parents' house. First time I slept in my own bed. First night I wasn't in handcuffs at night. And the two assistant deprogrammers were sleeping on the floor between me and the door in case I started floating. Tried to float out the door. So I woke up early before anyone else, and I have to go to the bathroom. So that the big guy who was right, like immediately in front of the door, he moved a little bit so I could get out. When I came back, they'd fallen asleep again. So this is my chance. So I tiptoed downstairs. Everyone else in the house was still asleep. Put on my shoes, and I was gone. So made my escape. Walked a couple miles down the railroad tracks so they couldn't follow me. And I got to a payphone. I called the New York Temple collect because I didn't have any change. And Trilokeshwar, he was the receptionist at the New York Temple. Collect call from Visvatomukha. Trilok, this is an extreme emergency. Accept the call. Accept the call. He accepted the call, and he put me through to Aditeshwara Swami. And Aditeshwara Swami arranged. He prepaid a ticket from the Chicago airport to New York, and I had $20 in my pocket because I had $20 in my pocket because the bureau next to the bed I was handcuffed to had $20 in the drawer, so I used that as bus fare to get to the airport. And I didn't have any ID or anything. And, in those days, you didn't need an ID to get in a plane. I didn't even have an ID to prove I was the one who the ticket was paid for. Said, you have a ticket for William Byers? Yes. Okay. And I walked on the plane and flew back to New York. Pragosh came and picked me up from the airport, and I was so happy to see another devotee. I fell down and offered full dandavats on the airport sidewalk and grabbed his feet. I think Pragosh was a little embarrassed by that, but I didn't care. So I didn't have any contact with my parents for a few years, but later, and we were able to reconcile to some degree. I got married a few years later. My mother and brother actually flew out for the wedding. My mother put on a sari. She still thought I wasted my life, but at least she resigned to the fact that was the life I chosen for myself. So looking back, what's the lesson? So Vaisheshika Prabhu has printed a little book called 4 Questions as a guide to your path in life, in Krishna consciousness. And one of the questions is, what's the lesson? Rather than think, why me? Why am I the victim here? No, what's the lesson? Just what's the lesson? The other question, just by the way, was, what's my mission? In other words, what's my purpose here in this life? How can I be of service? What's the lesson? And where am I investing my consciousness right now? So the lesson I took, looking back on the whole thing, was that at a time when my conviction was a little shaky, that Krishna was just laying it all out for me. Look, do you want to be a devotee or not? If you want to leave, the path, here's a convenient exit ramp. So, and actually, the lesson for all of us, we have this choice at every moment, to serve Krishna or to serve Maya. As in Vaisheshika's questions, where am I investing my consciousness right now? So I pray to everyone here, please give us strength and intelligence to always make that right choice. Oh, okay, so one more point. I was going to explain what exceptionally vigorous meant. So this is a quote from Ted Patrick from his book. He actually wrote a book bragging about his illegal activities. Sold a lot of copies, I think. So yes, it means the victim may not be free to leave when he wants. When a victim is exceptionally vigorous, it may even mean a measure of restraint. So if I've been certified as exceptionally vigorous by Ted Patrick in resisting his deprogramming, I take that as a badge of honor. So I can't give Ted Patrick the last word, so we'll give Prabhupada the last word. This is more of that quote that from the beginning. Oh, by the way, this is Trinavarta. Trinavarta was, baby Krishna was kidnapped. He was picked up by this demon Trinavarta in the form of a whirlwind and taken high in the sky. And Krishna became so heavy that Trinavarta crashed down to the ground and died. So Prabhupada says, this is from some letters to Balavanta when Balavanta was facing some opposition to our book distribution. And Balavanta was kind of phrasing his question such a way that he was kind of hoping Prabhupada would say, you know, maybe ease up a little bit, don't push so hard. But that wasn't Prabhupada's mood. He said, the world is feeling the weight of this Hare Krishna movement, especially in your country. The struggle will become acute because formerly they thought we were simply hippies. But now they are seeing our books and we're here to stay. We have to increase the book distribution more and more to firmly establish this movement, which is the only hope for the suffering living entities. So instead it's saying, ease up on the preaching, says, no, increase it more. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Questions, comments, discussion? Yes?
Journey and stuff, because it can help inspire others and stuff. And I don't know, like while you were like discussing this, I was kind of thinking about how like now this Krishna conscious movement, I feel like is a deprogramming movement, you know, because nowadays like everybody is so brainwashed by like social media and like trends and stuff like that. Like people cannot think for themselves. But like this Bhagavad Gita that Srila Prabhupada is, and even Srila Prabhupada himself, he encourages so much like thinking on our own, like really understanding like why we're following, and like I don't know, I heard like someone describe Bhagavad Gita in such a way that like the Bhagavad Gita actually teaches us to think, and you can see like with the interaction between like Krishna and Arjuna. So I don't know, I just kind of thinking like what 60 years ago, 70s was like 50 years ago, is like this was considered like a cult and needed deprogramming to get away from this. But like now we use Krishna consciousness to deprogram ourselves from like social media and stuff.
Everyone is subordinate, everyone is a servant. So you can be subordinate to the material nature and pursue sense gratification, the aim of life, or we offer a path to rediscover our real identity and our real purpose, which is in connection with the Supreme, just the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Right. Anyone else?
Yes, well, thank you so much. And this is the first time I think we had a real life story of someone, Prabhupada Disciple himself. I had to run my room, get my napkin tissues, because it was from emotional, he also got emotional. And this is what we can see how someone is dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. And Krishna didn't say this.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna didn't say this, Prabhupada said, these are the boys and girls who will help. And you're one of them. And also, the torture that you went through was something like, if you present in a very funny way. Someone was so fun, I was handcuffed, I was not given this thing, Shika was cut, neck beads was cut, most of it is all like our, connect our our life there, for you to accept that this was done for you and you remain. And of course, I'm sure that must have also felt with you, what could happen to me, my Shikha could happen to my life too if I don't submit to them, but somehow.
The devotees of all the groups they deprogrammed, devotees, they were the toughest. And they had the best return rate. So sometimes actually devotees would be deprogrammed and they'd never come back. They're mostly newer devotees who didn't have a solid footing in philosophy and practice. But the whole contention that you can't leave unless you're kidnapped, you're held by this psychological force, and which is kind of ridiculous because people would actually come and go all the time. In those days, most devotees were brahmacharis living in the temple, doing full-time service, preaching, doing temple service. But it was austere. I mean, we weren't coming from saintly backgrounds. We were, many of us hippies, and it was austere, but the reward was there to stick it out. So, any other questions?
I was going to say that, we haven't passed the microphone, but how much Prabhu went through, we have this liberty, and liberty should just become serious. Come out, take the association of people like him who have really experienced on his own hands, and went through and received the love of Prabhupada and Mr. Krishna. So, we have an excuse. That's a question to us, for us to take us back with ourselves. Otherwise, it might work for us to be going through what he did, because that will show our seriousness. But because everything is so relaxed for our lives, we don't take it seriously.
Don't expect that if you're trying to break free from this material nature, that the material nature isn't gonna test you, right? Some pushback, and it may not come in the form of some guy putting you in handcuffs. It may just come in the form of our own mind. But there's always going to be a test. I mean, we're bound by the shackles of lust, anger, greed. These are our handcuffs that we have to deal with every day. That's true.
Was there ever a point where you kind of just gave in to the fact that certain people in your life were always going to see you as some helpless victim? Nothing more? Did you ever stop arguing with those people or try to make a case?
Yes. Yeah, you have to be sensitive to where someone's coming from. I mean, that maybe it's not the best policy to try to preach heavy to your parents. It may not be. You have to judge where someone's coming from and what they're willing to accept. If someone's openly inimical, you can't. No point, before trying to preach to them, just cause them to commit more offense. Just be nice, give them some prashadam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you for such a wonderful class. I think even those devotees who grew up as Krishna conscious, like, the parents were devotees, there's still a conscious decision that has to be made. There's almost like a crossroads, almost like, are you going to actually commit and continue with this movement, or are you going to stray away? Like for me, it was like, an actual event that was like, okay, you can do this, or you can, stay at the temple, and it was like, that felt like a crossroads to me. But I feel like even if we're handed Krishna consciousness on a silver platter, we have to still make a conscious decision, otherwise we're kind of in that middle space, like, this is the thing I grew up with, but I'm still going out and doing all this sort of thing. So I liked how you kind of worded the story, and it was like, yeah, there was like Krishna was handing you an opportunity, and I think that was nice, and I liked how you put Srila Prabhupada's quotes, and I think it's just I just think it was just like so amazing that he took from that the result of his trial that you know it was like he could have said, oh yeah, this big struggle is now over and we don't have to worry about it anymore, but he was like, no, the judge is saying that it's a bona fide religion, so now my mission is successful. And I think that's the point that really, I guess, stuck out with me. Those are just two things I wanted to mention.
And that scene or that act of the play might be over. I kind of use that analogy with the curtain closed, Prabhupada walked off the stage. But now it's the next act, and how do we take what Prabhupada's given us and push it on even further? Prabhupada described how he built the foundation. Now we have to fill out the structure of the Krishna consciousness movement.
Comment, and then if anything, feel free to want to add on, Prabhu. I think it's also a testament, as you were mentioning, even through the entire process, your mentality going through. There's usually I'm trying to remember where the phrase and statement comes in relation to cults in terms of the more modern view. Normally, those type of brainwashed cults, which are usually just smaller groups which have some type of, like you mentioned, different activities that usually have a negative context, they usually fade away in due course of time. Either all the members are gone or the people come to their senses. But in the instance of Srila Prabhupada's movement, it did live up to the fact that it was a more, in his old English definition of a cult, an actual sect, which the New York trial would also refer to, but it survives the test of time. We are still here years later
And growing.
Considering how much it has gone from, even from right there in 1977 when Srila Prabhupada left this world, how much is it, even then, has still expanded. So sometimes cults can be a good thing. It just depends what's the context.
And Prabhupada referred to Christianity as a cult, Buddhism as a cult, Lord Chaitanya's movement is a cult. So it's the word has changed. That's what they latched onto as a means of attack. Well, see, you have this cult. You have Charles Manson, that cult, and this Hare Krishna. That's also a cult. We just try to lump them all in together. Actually, there was discussion among the devotees. Should we work together with these other movements like Scientology and like the Moonies, to try to combat this anti-cult movement? Where it says no, we stand on our own. We don't want to be associated with these other groups. Our defense is our books.
Hare Krishna. The counterculture at that time really helped in kind of opening people's minds and making people a bit more susceptible to spiritual progress. They were yearning for it. I don't know if you still see that same sense of spiritual longing in more recent times, or you've seen, I don't know what trends you see compared from before to now.
I don't see it the same way. That people may be. There's always a deep-seated interest in looking for some higher truth, but the willingness to just drop out of school, quit your job, leave your family, go live some alternative lifestyle in some religious group or hippie commune or anything else. That's not there, at least to the degree that it was. And I'll tell you what I thought was the end of that trend was Prabhupada departed in 1977. A year later was the Jonestown Massacre. That's when anti-cultism went mainstream. It was all the all the papers, all the news, this cult, that cult. What will be the next Jonestown? And guess who was at the top of the list? A reporter came and talked to the temple president at the time was Romapad Swami, and asked, because there had been stories in the paper how they had suicide drill. I think most of you know basically the story of the Jonestown Massacre. There was a group down in Guyana, South America, and they, at least according to the official story, they committed mass murder-suicide, and like almost 1,000 people died. So, according to the news reports, they had suicide drills down in Jonestown, where they kind of go through a dry run to practice committing mass suicide. So a reporter had asked came and asked Romapad Swami, Ramachari at the time, so do you have suicide drills in your group? Serious question, do you have suicide? Well, no, of course not. Well, if you did, how would you do it? Mukunda Maharaj, who was kind of the public relations person for ISKCON at that time, he termed it post-Jonestown dog pack journalism. So everybody was. So I think that to answer your question, that kind of quashed that the innocence that people could go make some radical change, and there was always that wariness, you know, that, could this be the next Jonestown?
Hare Krishna, bro. Recently I came across one prominent sannyasi in ISKCON, and this kind of discussion came through. Just wanted to kind of ask you, like, what do you think of this? So his take is, in fact, like, you know, he says that the way we dress, the way we present ourselves in front of like mass, like in front of people, we come across as a cult, because otherwise, you know, we would probably be just like anybody else, like, you know. So he says that why can't we just dress normally, like, you know, just like normal people, with pants, shirts, maybe necktie, like, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. So what do you think that? Would you suppose that if devotees at that time, if they were dressed like normal people, people would not have been targeted as a cult? Do you suppose? Or?
Not if they acted in this. Not if devotees acted in the same way, which is, you know, kind of separating ourselves and you know, living that dedicated monastic lifestyle. Monastic lifestyle is something they can't understand at all. The idea of celibacy and sannyas, I mean, that just fries their brain. They can't even imagine such a thing. So lots of people practicing that. There were plenty of groups that were labeled cults that were dressed in ordinary dress in those days. It wasn't just the dress. It actually maybe made it so they could really not take us seriously. That these are just crazy people out on the streets dressed in bed sheets and, you know, dancing around. So I mean, I think it's not a bad thing to distinguish ourselves and set ourselves apart from the mainstream society and dress in other ways. I mean, that's my opinion. I know there's a discussion. There's the Christian West, which is maybe what we're talking about. That you know, has a different opinion. So it's good. I mean, Prabhupada has many senior advanced preachers, and they can all have maybe a slightly different take on how to approach presenting Krishna consciousness to the public, and I don't think that's necessarily bad.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, very nice class today. To add this thing, wanted to ask you,
like you went through like so much in that, like so before that you stayed in the New York ashram for 4 years.
I was
So
in different temples, but I was in New York ashram at the time.
yeah, so like so you have been through like so much, like because in the start, like when you come to Krishna temple, you're like, is it a cult, not a cult? Like I don't know if anyone has gone through that question. Like I definitely had gone through this question, and like I used to Google it stuff, and I'm like, I'm coming to this temple. Is it like authentic temple? Is it like this thing? So like it requires a lot of research and like maturity to understand like the starting time, like your faith is very like what's the word you say, it's very turbulent. No, it's very like initial, like aparipapa, what's the word? Immature. So your faith is like just like, oh, I'm gonna go there and like I'm gonna make a rave or something like that. But so at what point of time do you think, like while practicing this movement, do you think like your faith matured enough that you went through all these struggles, like, and how did you like how was your journey of like making your faith more and more complete so that like you don't leave that moment and then this thing?
Of course, in those days there was no Google, there's no internet, you couldn't look it up. I never heard of the Hare Krishnas, and Bhakti Joe approached me on the streets of at the University of Illinois in Champaign, and I've never seen anything like this. He was dressed in a dhoti, and he handed me a stick of incense and asked for a donation. I gave him a quarter, and he gave me back to Godhead and invited me to the meeting of the Krishna Yoga Society, the Bhakti Yoga Society. Bhakti Yoga Club. It's the Bhakti Yoga Club. I think you have a Bhakti Yoga Club here too.
Yeah, please, yeah.
So that was the. So I went to the meeting of the Bhakti Yoga Club because I had a little bit of interest in yoga. Now I guess I would consider myself something of a spiritual seeker at that time. I was reading the popular spiritual books that were popular in those days. Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda, and Be Here Now by Ram Dass, and books on Zen, and taking a Hatha Yoga class. And so yeah, Bhakti Yoga Club, let's see what that's about. Devotees would come down from the Chicago temple every 2 weeks and put on a program, and there would be kirtan, there'd be Bhagavad Gita, there'd be prasadam, your basic Krishna consciousness program. Bhagavad Gita, kirtan, and prasadam. And they sold me books, and I started reading the books, and there was no anti-cult movement, there was no internet the internet can be a pretty dark place. And there's lots of propaganda against Krishna consciousness, or maybe even especially by ex-devotees. And there was none of that in those days. All I knew was these guys in front of me, they're talking about this chanting Bhagavad Gita. So, and at the end of the semester, I dropped out of school and moved into the temple. Actually, the first time I went to visit a temple was it was the next spring. I'd already dropped out of school. I hadn't moved to the temple yet, but I went with the devotees up to visit the Chicago temple. I'd never been to a temple before. I'd been chanting. I'd been reading Bhagavad Gita, and all I knew of Krishna consciousness was these 3 or 4 devotees who would come down to campus. And visiting the temple that first time at Gaur Purnim was just mind-blowing experience. Remember the curtains opening, and it was just complete sensory overload. Billowing smokes of clouds of incense, and the lights, and the flowers, and the loud kirtan, and the devotees shouting, Haribol, Haribol! And I was hooked after that.
That's very well.
So I think it's. Any question? Yes? Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for your talk. The question that came to mind is, how do we normalize bhakti in the culture, like let's say the Western culture where it's not necessarily normal?
That's a very good question.
Like at least in our lives.
Right. Of course, most of us these days, we're not living the life of a full-time devotee in the temple. We have jobs, we're going to school. So we have to make that, that balance, how to be in the world, but not of the world, as the Christians put it. And you have to deal in your ordinary dealings, you know, in your job or whatever, in an ordinary way, but try to have a solid basis of sadhana at home. Try to get up early and chant, immerse yourself in Krishna before your work day or whatever starts. And associate with devotees as much as possible. That's so important. Other association, without the association of devotees, the other association drag you down. And we can't be the Paramahamsa to enlighten the world on our own. We have to stay strong ourselves. We have to have the association of devotees and a solid sadhana at home. Read Prabhupada's books, chant Hare Krishna every day. Thank you. Hare Krishna.